Chapter 18, Relationships and Community. Quote, "My relationship, or as I like to refer to it, my relationship," end quote. Dane Cook, stand-up comedian. We mentioned Sally previously, an individual who experienced childhood physical and sexual abuse. We were struck by something she said during a session. Quote, "All I saw around me, as a child, were people that ignored each other, shouted at each other, hit each other, or threw things around the house. There was no affection, and no one really listened to anybody. Then I was married to that idiot for 10 years. How would I know what a healthy relationship is?" End quote. The idiot Sally was married to was a man who physically and emotionally abused her, which is a good example of re-traumatization. Sally's words serve to illustrate an important point. If much of what you experienced while growing up or during adulthood represents dysfunctional or painful relationships, how would you know what a healthy relationship is? It's difficult to recognize something you have little experience of. What if someone asks you, "Do you like the taste of poutine?" Unless you are Canadian, you are likely to say, "I have no idea. I've never had it." Poutine, by the way, is French fries or chips smothered in cheese curds and brown gravy. If a child experiences safety, affection, love, and genuine care, they come to know what this is. As an adult, it's then easier to recognize if someone is providing them with the sort of good experiences they had in childhood, and if they meet someone likely to neglect or harm them, it's easier to realize that this is not healthy because they have a basis for comparison. Childhood trauma occurs within relationships, and recovery from childhood trauma also occurs within relationships. This is not the sort of news many people who were traumatized want to hear. Many people who experienced childhood harm would prefer to do their recovery work in silence and relative isolation. On the face of it, this can appear to make sense. If you got hurt within relationships, why would you want to rely on relationships to help you recover? However, there is a problem with this approach, which is captured by Bessel van der Kolk. Quote, "Managing your terror all by yourself gives rise to another set of problems: dissociation, despair, addictions, a chronic sense of panic, and relationships that are marked by alienation, disconnection, and explosions." End quote. Before proceeding, we want to mention the following. If you have experienced a pattern of unhealthy or toxic relationships, past or present, this chapter may feel challenging. You may feel a range of emotions doing this work, such as anger, sadness, shame, or just a sense of feeling upset. We encourage you to look after yourself. Be careful not to go down any sinkhole of self-blame, and use any support available. Why do relationships have to be so difficult? It needs to be said that everyone who experienced childhood harm is unique, and we have known people who have managed to create safe and intimate friendships or partnerships. We've also worked with people who have very good relationship skills. However, many who experienced childhood trauma will find relationships complex or difficult, either currently or in the past. And it's worth noting that one of the 6 diagnostic criteria for CPTSD is difficulties with relationships. Such difficulties can take the form of unstable and painful relationships, feeling alienated within relationships, or periods of relative isolation. Self-blame for painful relationships or the experience of social isolation is common. Being able to connect childhood harm to relationship problems in adulthood can help ease self-blame and encourage self-compassion. Below are three explanations for why you may have struggled with relationships as an adult. See what you can identify with. 1. People evoke anxiety and avoidance. The experience of childhood abuse, neglect, or abandonment occurs within relationships. You were harmed by other people. So it makes sense that being in public spaces, meeting new people, or intimacy may evoke anxiety. Something as harmless as being looked at by someone can trigger a sympathetic nervous system response. Normal social experiences, which offer fun and opportunities to develop friendships or partnerships, can be experienced with a sense of dread or fear. Those with a history of childhood harm don't plan it that way. It just happens. A person's body, brain, and emotions signal danger in safe social situations. When prospects for closeness present themselves, rather than enthusiasm, the reaction can be an impulse for distance and protection. The consequence is that opportunities for intimacy or a sense of community can get missed. 2. The role of shame. As we explored in a previous chapter, shame is a common consequence of childhood harm. Trauma-based shame is experienced as a personal sense of inadequacy, defectiveness, or brokenness. However, shame is relational. It was created within relationships and then is reactivated within later relationships. When people who struggle with shame meet someone new or intimacy begins to occur, they may think this person will discover how awful, repulsive, or broken I am. There are many ways people will then try to protect themselves from being found out. They may create distance or end relationships, construct fake personas, or act out their inner sense of defectiveness to test the relationship. None of this tends to happen by conscious design, but the problem of shame often results in feelings of alienation and social disconnection. 3. Relationship skills have to be learned. If someone wants to be a computer technician, nurse, or artist, we assume they will need to learn a set of skills. For some reason, many people don't see relationships as requiring skills which have to be learned. But relationships require many complex skills, and no one is born with these skills. As children, we need to be taught or shown relationship skills by the people who are meant to be caring for us. If you did not have a caring adult who took the time to teach and show you relationship skills, you were at a disadvantage. It's also possible that the people you grew up with were unskilled within their relationships. So just watching what was happening around you amounted to a bad education in relationship skills. Exercise 1. Were you disadvantaged concerning relationship development? Please pause the audio and complete Exercise 1 in the guidebook. Identifying toxic patterns in others. There is probably no such thing as an individual with a perfectly healthy personality or who always relates to others with wonderfully healthy behavior. We all have blind spots, can have bad days, and may not always relate in a perfectly healthy manner. However, certain people spend much of their time relating to others with behavior which can be considered toxic. By toxic, we mean insensitive or egocentric behavior, or behaviors which are harmful or draining for others. Some people who experienced childhood harm can have a difficult time identifying those who exhibit toxic behaviors. This is understandable. If the caregivers you grew up with related to you with toxic styles of behavior, this may seem normal or simply the way people are. Later in life, you may accept similar toxic behaviors in others because, without a good basis of comparison, it's harder to recognize how abnormal these behaviors actually are. Recovery requires being able to spot people who tend to exhibit toxic behaviors, as well as people you can have safe and nurturing relationships with. When we refer to relationships in this chapter, this can mean any type of relationship, e.g., partner, friend, work or schoolmate, family member, etc. Below are descriptions of what we identify as 7 toxic styles of relating. Before exploring this area, we need to make a couple of points. First, notice that we refer to toxic behaviors rather than using the descriptor toxic people. This is because we don't see people who relate in toxic ways as fundamentally bad people or necessarily incapable of change. Some people who relate through toxic behaviors may have been abused or neglected, may have been taught to get needs met in toxic ways, and may not be fully conscious of how their behavior impacts others. Second, it's not a simple matter of saying that some people have toxic styles of relating and other people don't. People are more complex than this, and toxic styles of relating can exist along a spectrum. All of us can at times relate to others with behaviors which are occasionally or to some extent toxic. And people may exhibit toxic behaviors in certain relationships, but not in others. For example, some people may express toxic behaviors within their intimate personal relationships, but not at work or in other social contexts. The main point of exploring the 7 styles of toxic relating is to recognize if you have been or are currently in relationships with people who relate in toxic ways. The point is also to protect yourself and work on your development. But it's normally impossible for individuals to do this work without also considering whether they too can sometimes act with toxic patterns of behavior. If you discover this to be the case, please don't beat up on yourself. There will be reasons why you fell into such styles, and it's something that can be worked on. You'll have an opportunity to explore your own behavior at the end of this chapter. As you read the descriptions below, consider whether you have been in relationships with people expressing toxic behaviors, either in the past or currently. 1. The controlling bully style. This individual can have intimidating, critical, and controlling behavior. They generally have to have their way, and others must accept how they see things. They may put people down, make others feel defective, and act to control others' lives and relationships. In more extreme expressions, this style leads to direct physical or emotional abuse. How do you know? The feeling state around this individual is one of fear. If you're in a relationship with someone who relates as a controlling bully, you are often on edge or walking on eggshells. You don't feel confident expressing your views or needs, and you may feel small or inadequate around this person. 2. The egocentric neglector style. This individual style tends to see their needs, ideas, and wishes as simply far more important than yours. They don't really listen to you, are poor at genuine empathy or concern, and the focus of attention needs to mainly be about them, not you. How do you know? The feeling state around this person is one of neglect or being unvalued. Your needs, views, wishes, etc. don't seem to matter much. Spending time with this person can leave you feeling unimportant or uncared for. 3. The manipulative exploiter style. This person may express concern, care, or interest in you, but there is a hidden agenda. Rather than being fundamentally interested in you, they focus on what they can get from you. They may lie or present themselves or their intentions in ways which are deceptive. How do you know? This style can present more covertly than other styles, so you may not know for a while, but the feeling state with this style eventually is one of mistrust, frustration, or anger. You can eventually see that you are being treated as a resource rather than a person. 4. The emotionally unstable style. If you're in a relationship with someone with this style of behavior, it isn't easy to know how they will be from one day to the next, or even 1 hour to the next. They can flip between emotional states quite dramatically, going from happy to critical or angry, enthusiastic to despondent, and so on. The web of relationships they are part of can seem like some daytime TV drama, and you can get dragged into these dramas. How do you know? The feeling state around this person is often one of anxiety because you just don't know what's coming next. Their volatile emotional states tend to infect others around them, so you can end up absorbing their feeling states, and you may be expected to play a role in the relationship dramas they often seem caught up in. 5. The dependent style. With this individual, there always seems to be something wrong or an overwhelming dilemma they need help with. The problem is that if you manage to help them in one respect, more problems or needs suddenly arise. They may seem to appreciate your help, but their appreciation of you as a person depends on you helping them, which is largely a one-sided affair. Inevitably, you end up being the giver or carer, and they don't reciprocate in an equitable way. How do you know? The feeling state you experience, sooner or later, tends to be one of frustration or resentment. There is a growing sense that your needs will just not get met. 6. The passive submissive style. This individual has a very difficult time knowing and expressing their needs or asserting themselves. They tend to have poor self-esteem, and they feel guilty if they express their needs or views. How do you know? It can seem nice to spend time with the passive submissive style. After all, they are very attentive to your needs. But after a while, it can feel a bit unreal because you aren't quite sure you know who this person is, how they see things, and what they want. They almost seem to invite exploitation, and that can feel unsettling. 7. The nihilist style. Life can be rubbish and human beings can commit atrocious acts, but most of us can see the other side of the equation as well. The nihilist style, however, sees human beings as fundamentally bad and life as quite pointless. They seem to have a genius for pointing out the negatives of a situation, seeing the bad side of people, or dismissing opportunities as a waste of time. Nihilism can be an interesting place to visit, but you wouldn't want to live there. How do you know? The feeling state you experience if you spend enough time with this individual is despair, and the confidence you feel in yourself and life may begin to ebb away. Exercise 2. Identifying toxic styles. Please pause the audio and complete Exercise 2 in the guidebook. A strange question. On occasion, we spontaneously ask clients with trauma histories an apparently straightforward question that can turn out to be anything but straightforward. The question is below. Have a look at it and see what spontaneously comes up for you. Exercise 3. Set aside any work relationships in respect to this question, as we are only interested in non-work relationships. What is the point of relationships? Go with your gut answer. Jot down whatever comes up for you, trying not to look ahead in the book. Please pause the audio and complete Exercise 3 in the guidebook. Do not feel badly if this question seemed weird or difficult. A number of people with trauma histories find this question perplexing. Some may reply in a pessimistic manner, e.g., there is no point to relationships. Some focus exclusively on their role in caring for others, e.g., it's about looking after others. Some are just stuck or lack confidence in answering, e.g., I'm not sure, I don't know. Some feel defensive, e.g., that's a pretty stupid question. An explanation may relate to the fact that children, just like most mammals, are naturally wired for spontaneous play. From the moment they get up to the moment they go to bed, the point of life is playing and having fun. However, in order to play, a child needs to feel safe and have opportunities to play. Play can be solitary, but much of the time, play involves relationships, other children and adults you play with. If you feel safe and cared for and have other children and adults you can enjoy playing with, you learn to see relationships in this respect. So, later in life, if someone asks you the question, what is the point of relationships? Your answer might be something like this. The point of relationships is that they are fun or interesting. You see that essentially relationships involve playing, although the manner of playing may resemble something other than Lego or Barbies. Relationships are also for caring and being cared for, but they are fundamentally supposed to be fun and interesting. A child exposed to abuse and neglect comes to see relationships as something you have to protect yourself from or survive, rather than opportunities for fun. It's understandable that, as an adult, some will continue to see relationships the same way. A dinner party or other social gatherings are not seen as opportunities for playing, but something to survive or at least get through. Children who grow up with safety and love do not need to learn how to play. It comes naturally. For some adults who didn't have safety and love as a child, it can feel like playing is something they need to learn or get used to. There is no simple or single way forward in this respect. Some people have told us that they learned how to play when they themselves had children who they needed to play with. Others have told us how they found playing with their dogs, cats, or other animals to have helped in this respect. Some managed to develop a safe relationship with someone who was very playful. If you struggle to feel safe enough to play, perhaps just being aware of the issue is a good start in encouraging you to reflect on the challenge. Identifying features of healthy relationships. The challenge for those who experienced childhood harm is not just realizing when you are in a relationship with someone with toxic behaviors. It's also about identifying people who can offer opportunities for safe and nurturing experiences and finding the confidence to develop relationships with them. This can be less straightforward than it may appear because people who experience childhood harm can feel jaded concerning relationships. However, there are many people who are largely capable of healthy relationships. Below are features which can be associated with healthy relationships. For comparison, we contrast these features with related unhealthy expressions. These are not facts, but ideas for you to reflect on. Also, you may have additional ideas we neglected to mention, which you can add to our list. The first 7 keys for healthy relationships apply to all manner of relationships. The final factor applies only to partnerships involving sexuality. Please pause the audio and review Chart 1 in the guidebook. There are a couple of points which need to be made. First, the 8 factors in the left column represent an ideal relationship. Ideal relationships only exist in certain films or within the lyrics of some songs. Even good relationships, in times of stress, can fall into periods of difficulty and dysfunction. However, within a healthy relationship, there will be a core of trust, safety, mutual interest, affection, and respect. This is the relationship's default setting. A healthy partnership or friendship may hit some hard times where things get a bit dysfunctional for a while, but it tends to find its way back to the healthy default setting. A healthy relationship is like an ocean-going yacht with a solid keel. There will be storms, and the boat will get tossed around for a while, but the keel will keep it from capsizing, and there will mostly be stable periods of sailing. In an unhealthy relationship, there are frequent storms, people are often scared, and there is a good chance the boat will capsize. Second, one of the features indicated for a healthy relationship is trust, open communication, and basic honesty. A phrase you will often hear concerning recovery from complex trauma is the need to break the silence. This is much more than some bland cliche. We explored in a previous chapter how very common it is for children to keep what's happening to them a secret, and we looked at the many reasons why this occurs. Not being able to acknowledge what happened and its impact on yourself creates a divide within an individual. The HTP asks you to look at what happened directly and with insight, which may help heal this inner division. However, if you have a friendship or partnership that provides sufficient trust and safety, this can be the context through which you can break the silence with someone else. If you are listened to, supported, and accepted, this can help heal the separation a traumatized person feels between themselves and the rest of the human race. Exercise 4. How healthy are your relationships? Please pause the audio and complete exercise 4 in the guidebook. Believing you deserve healthy relationships. The previous chapter on re-traumatization goes some way to explain why certain individuals are more likely to end up in unhealthy relationships. As discussed, children who were abused or neglected are more likely to experience further harm through adult relationships because 1. It's what they expect to happen, 2. It's what they feel they deserve, and 3. It's what they are comfortable with, i.e., you might feel uncomfortable being loved and cared for. The issue of self-worth gets to the heart of why many people find themselves stuck in unhealthy relationships. So many individuals struggle to feel they deserve good relationships, relationships where they are thought about, valued, and treated well. Shelley is a good illustration. She was badly emotionally neglected and then placed into care at the age of 12. From age 15 through her late 20s, she used heroin and had numerous sexual relationships with men. Therapy helped her see what had been going on. Quote, "Men wanted to have sex with me, so I let them. Sometimes they would give me drugs or money, but I also did it because of the attention I got from them. For a while, I thought Maybe I did it because there was something messed up about me sexually, that maybe I was a sexual masochist. But that's not it. The only reason I had all these temporary relationships with men who wanted sex off me was because that's all I thought I could hope for. End quote. In other words, Shelley never felt deserving of something better than being used by men for sex. Getting off heroin allowed her to think carefully about her past and how it damaged her self worth. She needed to develop better feelings about herself before accepting that she deserved to be treated with respect and care. It was slow work, but feeling that she deserved to be in a healthy relationship was a cornerstone of Shelley's recovery. We are asking you to consider to what extent you feel deserving of healthy relationships, because unless you get to grips with this issue, you are unlikely to ever break a chain of unhealthy relationships. Even if you recognize that you are in an unhealthy relationship with someone exhibiting toxic behaviors, unless you feel deserving of something better, this insight probably won't make any difference to your life. Exercise 5. Do you feel deserving of healthy relationships? Please pause the audio and complete Exercise 5 in the guidebook. If you felt comfortable doing this exercise and the statements you read felt correct or self-evident, this is a good sign. It suggests that you believe you deserve healthy relationships. But if you felt uncomfortable to read these statements, or if you found it hard to believe what you were saying, this suggests you have work to do. No simple suggestion can tell you how to feel more deserving of relationships where you are safe, cared about, and feel valued. For some people, just developing insight into the problem of not feeling deserving of healthy relationships is an essential step. This insight can raise awareness in the context of current relationships, as illustrated by Chloe. Chloe had been abandoned by her mother at a young age, and her father had been too busy with work and a string of relationships to women to care much about her. Chloe is currently in a relationship with a man who didn't listen to her, frequently put her down, forgot birthdays, and spent time largely with his drinking buddies. His behavior struck us as a mix of the egocentric neglector and the controlling bully styles. When Chloe came to appreciate how little she felt she deserved a healthy relationship, she began to relate differently to her partner's behavior. Quote, Martin was sitting on the couch, and I told him about something that happened at work earlier, and he totally ignored me. I know he heard me, but he literally stared into space and didn't bother saying anything. He'd done this hundreds of times over the years, but I thought to myself, this is so wrong. He shouldn't treat me like I don't exist. End quote. Avoiding or protecting yourself from people with toxic behaviors. What can you do if you think you might be in relationships with people who exhibit toxic behaviors? Sometimes a good starting place is, like Chloe, just observing what happens in your relationships, reflecting on your understanding of what's healthy and toxic, and paying attention to your feelings, thoughts, and needs. It may be a matter of questioning what was once seen as acceptable or tolerable. But what if you see that you are clearly in an unhealthy relationship with someone who exhibits significant toxic behaviors? There is no simple advice which can be given because so much depends on the situation and nature of the relationship. One option, of course, is to end the relationship. This may be a good idea if it's pretty clear your needs are not being met. You are quite sure this individual isn't going to change, and it just makes sense to move on. Sometimes, however, the relationship might feel important, and you think things can change. Option 2 can mean asserting yourself and letting them know what you need, which may give the relationship a chance to move in a healthy direction. What about instances where a person's behaviors are clearly toxic, there is little chance they will change, but you still don't want to end the relationship? This can sometimes be the case with family members. Option 3 can be about setting boundaries to protect yourself from the toxicity. When people find themselves in a relationship with someone who exhibits toxic behaviors and is unlikely to change, they sometimes try to control the person or their behavior. This rarely works, and you can get into an ongoing struggle for control which feels like you have stepped into quicksand. Rather than attempting to control their behavior, it's often better to simply set boundaries. We mentioned Carrie previously. She had been emotionally abused by her mother, a woman she described as an unstable drama queen. Despite this history, Carrie did not want to end the relationship and created some healthy boundaries to protect herself. Quote, I made it clear to Mom that I would visit on Sundays with my two girls, but that we would stay for an hour, and if she becomes unpleasant, then we will leave. I had to leave a couple of times when she started being mean to one of my girls. End quote. Notice that Carrie wasn't trying to control or get her 70-year-old mother to change who she is. She is just being clear about boundaries and what's acceptable. Boundaries can exist in terms of limiting the time you spend with someone, or ending phone calls or visits when you reach a point where behavior is unacceptable. These are physical ways of setting boundaries, but you can also protect yourself psychologically or emotionally by setting boundaries in your own mind. The voice you may need to find might sound something like this: You can act in toxic ways if you want to, but I am not going to be confused or hurt or distressed by your behavior. Reparative relationships. The idea of a reparative relationship was mentioned during the chapter on retraumatization. Briefly, a reparative relationship is one in which at least some of the harm from childhood gets mended. If a child is physically or sexually abused, they often come into adulthood imagining that the world and people will hurt them. Having a relationship with someone they feel safe with helps to repair some of the earlier harm and supports the belief that the world and other people will not necessarily cause harm. If a child is emotionally neglected or abandoned, they tend to arrive at adulthood imagining that others are likely to neglect or leave them. A relationship in which they feel genuinely cared for, valued, and secure helps repair some of the previous harm. Creating or accepting reparative relationships is often an important part of an individual's recovery. Alicia's childhood history had been one of physical and emotional abuse and abandonment, and her description below illustrates a reparative relationship. Quote, We have our problems, like most couples. Stresses about money and that sort of thing. But I know Don won't hurt me, and I know he really cares about me. I've been horrible to him sometimes, and he doesn't leave me, so I don't think he will. End quote. Reparative relationships are not always partnerships. They can come in many forms, such as friendships, a relationship with a teacher, a relationship with an older individual who seems like a parent figure, or a relationship to a sibling. A reparative relationship can occur in adulthood, but certain individuals can identify someone from their childhood who helped cushion the trauma they were experiencing, such as a teacher or coach. A relationship with a pet can also be reparative, as was illustrated by Toby, a man who experienced childhood physical and emotional abuse. Quote, For years I wanted a dog, but I was worried that I wouldn't be able to look after it the right way. Kelly is a collie mixed breed, and he was a rescue dog. People who say that a dog only cares about you because you feed them don't know what they are talking about. Kelly is very affectionate, and I know that I'm important to him. He's very protective of me and goes mad whenever the postman arrives at the door. End quote. However, creating or accepting a reparative relationship can be difficult for many. When meeting someone who might be able to offer a relationship in which they would feel safe, cared for, or valued, they might not trust it. So they might avoid opportunities to create such relationships or find ways to push away the people they need. Exercise 6. 3 questions concerning reparative relationships. Please pause the audio and complete exercise 6 in the guidebook. Relationship skills. We explored how relationship skills must be learned and that many people who experienced childhood harm were disadvantaged in this respect. If you struggle with social confidence or feel you need to develop relationship skills, this is nothing to feel badly about. However, there may be a complication that needs considering. People who have healthy and rewarding relationships tend to make relationships a priority in their lives. If a person has been hurt within childhood and adult relationships, they can lose trust in relationships. This can result in a cynical view of relationships. We mentioned Alice previously, who put things quite bluntly when she said, "I don't like people." Alice's words illustrate the dilemma. Her life is a self-fulfilling prophecy. She has a long history of being hurt by people, so she does not trust or like people. Therefore, she does not see relationships as a priority, and so there is little point in developing relationship skills. It's little wonder she does not have healthy and supportive relationships. It's possible that, despite your experiences, you have good relationship skills and feel confident in social situations. But if you struggle with social confidence and skills, this area is just another facet of your recovery. A detailed description of relationship skills is beyond the scope of this chapter, but there are many books and online resources you can access. Seeing relationships as a priority in your life is the motivation for this form of development. If you want to work on relationship skill development, but are not sure where to begin, Alan Garner's Conversationally Speaking has helped untold numbers of people. Despite being written over 40 years ago, it's still one of the best resources, and a new edition came out in 2021, co-written by Caparaletti. Your contribution to healthy relationships. Early editions of this chapter asked readers to consider patterns of toxic behaviors in others, as you did previously. However, we did not ask people using the guidebook to reflect on whether they may at times fall into coping through toxic behaviors. During one group therapy session many years ago in which we were discussing this chapter, an older gentleman named Julian said something that we were struck by. Quote, "I get why it's important for us to consider how we've been in relationships with people who have toxic behaviors. But how come you don't ask us about our own toxic behaviors? I got lots of those," end quote, said with a broad grin. Julian's remark was well timed and got a good laugh, but it was a useful moment of learning for us clinicians. On reflection, Julian's advice makes sense for a particular reason. 2 considerations are likely important. 1. Avoiding or limiting time with people who display significant toxic behaviors. And 2. Self-reflection, which can allow us to recognize when we may fall into coping through toxic behaviors. Julian made us aware that the chapter was only focusing on half of the story. Since adding a new section to the chapter, we have seen a number of people manage some very self-honest reflection with respect to how they can at times fall into certain toxic behaviors. Rob serves as a good example of this personal development work. He experienced childhood neglect and abandonment and had felt lonely and scared for much of his life. Rob came to appreciate that he was treating his wife in a highly controlling way, checking her phone and email records, and getting her to call or text him several times a day concerning her whereabouts, which is probably the controlling bully style. One day, he happened to watch a movie featuring a very controlling man, and he identified with the character in a way that shocked and upset him. Quote, I just thought, oh my God, I'm like the guy in the movie. I'm really controlling. I'm just scared she will leave me, which is why I act this way. But I've got to do something about this. End quote. There are, of course, a range of toxic behaviors anyone can fall into if under enough stress, and Rob illustrates just one way this can play out. The exercise below will ask you to explore any toxic behaviors you may fall into at certain times or within certain relationships. If you recognize such patterns and it feels upsetting or elicits a shame response, we advise you to try and see any past behaviors psychologically rather than through the lens of self-punishment or shame. If you at times cope through such behaviors, you are much more than just those behaviors. Rob managed it by recognizing that he was falling into the controlling bully behavior, but could see that he was scared of being abandoned, and this was in turn a consequence of childhood abandonment and neglect. Exercise 7. Your contribution to healthy relationships. Please pause the audio and complete exercise 7 in the guidebook. Finding community. Human beings are communal animals, just like elephants, gorillas, penguins, honeybees, and even jellyfish. Millions of years of evolution designed us for communal experiences. Loneliness and associated emotions remind us that we were constructed to be a part of a group or groups of other humans. However, there is a common dilemma faced by people who experienced childhood harm. Most of these people were harmed in the context of a group. Many experienced danger in the first group they were part of, their family. School is often the second group we belong to, and some experienced abuse or rejection there. This sets up a contradiction. Evolution designed us for group membership, but our experience has taught us that groups can be dangerous. As a result, our nervous system may signal danger when we have opportunities for group experiences. There is no single solution to this dilemma, but we can offer 3 ideas and the story of Mark, a man who did find a way forward. First, isolation or social avoidance will not work in the long run because it goes against the very fibers of what makes us human. So, if that's the solution you have in mind, it's probably helpful to give up on it. Second, certain people who experience social disconnection or isolation can feel unsure about how to find a sense of group belonging, often because their confidence in themselves and others has been compromised. For some, the question can be, where do I begin? If this is the case for you, there is a principle which can help. Human beings often form groups with respect to a shared interest. Photography, cars, every expression of sport, gym clubs, book clubs, art or crafts, politics, etc. Whatever your interest, there is a group of human beings who seem to find each other, and the internet has made this easier today than at any time in human history. There is, no joking, a cloud appreciation society and an extreme ironing bureau in Britain. Third, if past trauma means that your nervous system gets badly triggered when in a new group, it may help to go gradually. Be open about the difficulties you have and ask for support if you can. Some find that online groups are an easier place to begin. Society is probably more trauma aware today than ever before, and most people will understand and support you. Mark is a good example. Mark had experienced quite serious abuse and neglect within his family home before being shipped off to a boarding school where he experienced more abuse. Aside from contact with his daughter and two grandkids, his only social connections were through volunteering as a moderator for a gaming site, which provided no real intimacy. As therapy was nearing the end, he expressed frustration that little progress had been made with the chronic feelings of anger, generalized anxiety, and poor sleep which had caused him to seek help. His therapist challenged him, pointing out that he had worked hard at developing insight, but that he hadn't yet taken risks in creating social connections. During therapy, Mark had developed an interest in mindfulness meditation. His therapist encouraged him to attend a local mindfulness meditation group, which met monthly. Just the idea of joining such a group elicited significant anxiety, and it required another 2 sessions of preparation and planning before Mark was able to join his first session. Email communication and then a phone call Mark had made with the group leader helped. Explaining how anxious he gets in groups allowed the leader to reassure him in ways which made that first session possible. Insight had been essential, but the sense of belonging he eventually experienced produced noticeable reductions in the chronic symptoms he had brought to therapy. This ends the audio for the chapter on relationships and community.